High Five is one of our favorite R&B groups from the 90s. Like many other groups, they have had major highs and major lows. But one group member took that major low to an ultimate low. This is the story of High Five and the tragic turn former group member Russell Neal took in his life. Welcome back to DannieBSpeaks presents Not Another True Crime Podcast. In this episode, I will tell the story of R&B music group High Five, who rose to fame in the early 90s. Even though they still perform today, the group has been through some of the worst tragedies that you can ever imagine. High Five enjoyed major success in the early 90s as one of the best-selling R&B groups of the decade. Led by the phenomenal vocals of lead singer, the late Tony Thompson, they gave us such hits as She's Playing Hard to Get, Quality Time, I Like the Way the Kissing Game, I Just Can't Handle It, Unconditional Love. I could go on, but you know the songs. They had hits, let's just say. The original group members included Thompson, Marcus Sanders, Toriano Easley, and Russell Neal, all whom were from Waco, Texas, except Toriano, who was from Oklahoma City. Now, right before things could take off for the group, the first tragedy hit. One of the founding members, Toriano Easley, was arrested and convicted of involuntary manslaughter after getting into a deadly fight outside a nightclub. As a result, he was replaced in the group by another Waco native, Roderick Pooh Clark. Not long after that, Bronx native Tristan Irby joined the group. After the success of their first self-titled debut album, they went into the second album with not only high hopes, but also extremely high expectations. However, that wave of success was about to come tumbling down brick by brick over the next few years. While on a promotional tour for their lead single, She's Playing Hard to Get, from their second album, Keep It Going On, tragedy would hit the group once again. While on the road, part of their caravan was involved in a devastating car accident. Sadly, group member Roderick Pooh Clark was left paralyzed from the chest down. Unfortunately, he had to leave the group. But then there was Russell Neal. Oh, Russell. To me, Russell just seemed like a totally different breed. Before I even knew what horrific thing he had done that we will discuss later, it was during their TV One Unsung episode, which aired in 2014, where he really rubbed me the wrong way. It appeared that he tried to stake his claim in the group as the businessman. Don't get me wrong, that's fine. Every group should have that, and a lot of them do. Everyone in the group has their own part. It's always been like that through the history of groups, I guess. But with the outcome of his business decisions, he didn't seem to be a great businessman or a smart businessman. I also didn't notice until the Unsung episode that he wasn't in the She's Playing Hard to Get video. After all those years, I had no idea. This video was shot before the car accident, so Roderick Clark was still in the group, so he was in the video. But they used a dancer as to give the illusion of there being 5 members in the group. After all those years and seeing that video over and over again, I had no idea. Now, the reason why he wasn't in the video was due to him holding out on contract negotiations because he felt that High Five was holding him back. He wanted to be more of a singer. He was known for his dance moves, but he wasn't a strong enough singer, so the record label didn't want to go in that direction, and he wasn't impressed. They wanted to keep things the way they were, keep that going into the second album. Now, he did appear in the next video, which was Quality Time, written by one Robert Kelly. But for Russell, that was it. After that, he was out of the group. High Five went on to release a few songs on some very popular movie soundtracks. Remember those? Now, sidebar. Remember when we anticipated the release of a movie soundtrack as much as the movie? And there were even some times where the soundtrack was actually better than the movie. I mean, I'm just saying, seriously. But anyway, moving on. So after the release of their third studio album, Faithful, now if you pay close attention, there were two new members. One was a replacement for Roderick Clark, who had to leave the group due to the car accident and being paralyzed. And the other replacement was for, you guessed it, Russell Neal. After mild success of the Faithful album, lead singer Tony Thompson released a solo album titled Sexational in the summer of 1995, with its lead single being I Wanna Love Like That, which is still my jam to this day. A few years later, he reformed High Five with 4 new members, releasing a Christmas album in 2004 and then a new studio album called The Return in 2005. After the release of that album, Tony and the new members were served with a cease and desist letter from original group members Tristan Irby and Marcus Sanders. Wendy Williams and her messy ass read the letter out loud on her then radio show, The Wendy Williams Experience. This stopped the distribution of album sales and them performing under the name of High Five. So it appears that Tony put this group together behind his former group members' back, where they didn't even know they were former group members. So with no money coming in, it is said that Tony hit rock bottom. It was getting around that Tony was getting high off of Freon from air conditioning units. At first, people didn't believe it, but it came out to be true. So in early 2007, after hearing about their friend, the group lineup from the Faithful album all came back together, which of course included Tony, and were working on getting the group back together. However, on June 1st, 2007, Tony's body was discovered by security officers around 10 p.m. near an air conditioning unit outside of his apartment complex in Waco, Texas. Tony had died from toxic effects from inhaling a toxic amount of Freon. That's so sad. He was only 31 years old. Now, High Five continues to perform to this day, but in my opinion, no one can replace Tony's voice. But I'm happy they are still together and performing like many acts from the 90s. I mean, y'all, we're old. We just need to face it. So now on to Russell and his crazy bullshit. So Russell Neal never performed again, or worked in the music business for that matter, after leaving High Five in the early 90s. No one had heard from Russell Neal until 2014 when High Five's Unsung episode aired on TV One. Now, I mentioned earlier that he rubbed me the wrong way in that episode. To me, he seemed to be extremely arrogant and had so much to say for someone who seemed to contribute so little. Now, that was just my observation in being familiar with the group and then seeing him on the Unsung. But people who knew Russell say that he was just cool Russ, and when the group first started, he knew his place in the group. He knew he wasn't a strong singer, but he could sing, and no one could touch him on the dance floor. He was one of the best dancers. Him and Marcus Sanders were mainly known as the dancers of the group. Now, he was always cool, laid back, and extremely smart, and maybe a little too smart for his own good. And towards the end of the Unsung episode, if you watched it, he seemed to have disappeared. For someone who played such a huge part in the episode, he didn't really appear towards the end of the episode. Then a flash came on the screen saying that he wasn't able to participate in the rest of the interview because, well, Russell was in jail. He was accused of murdering his estranged girlfriend and the mother of his sons, Catherine Martinez. So let's get into it. Russell's beautiful girlfriend, Catherine Martinez, would stop at nothing to be on top. The stunning 24-year-old Texas girl had the looks, the energy, and the infectious drive to be in the public eye. Girlfriend was a fitness trainer, a model, a bodybuilder where she had won championships for that, and was also training to become a professional female boxer. But Catherine's greatest joy and accomplishments, of course, were her 2 sons she had with now former 90s music star Russell Neal. What wasn't working was her relationship with Russell, and he wasn't working either. For that matter, he hadn't been working for a long time. When they first met, Russell, who hadn't been in the group for well over 15 years and hadn't performed or anything, was still riding the wave mentally of High Five. Catherine, who was almost half of Russell's age when they met, was given many unfulfilled promises, and he even had her thinking that he was still in the business. He just worked on the business side of things. The reality was Russell couldn't hold a job, and he had no backup plan when he walked away from High Five. However, Russell was smooth and he won her over, not only with his personality and his maturity, but she was enamored with his past in the spotlight. This was an A+ for a Texas girl with stars in her eyes. She felt that they could be a great team. Since he was so quote-unquote business smart, he could help her with her career. Now, who else better than to manage your career than the man you love, right? But Catherine's mom, Mary, said of Catherine meeting Russell, that's when everything changed. Everything had changed in their life. Catherine's mom and sisters weren't buying his game and weren't too sweet on him like Catherine was. At first, she felt that she had a sugar daddy. Now, these are their words, not mine. She would constantly brag on him about all this money he had, which he led her to believe. Now, she didn't care about his popularity from back in the day. Her sister, Emmy, let Catherine know that, well, he may have been popular, but he's not popular no more. He's not popular and he's flat broke. And the shade is, she was right. He didn't have any money. Emmy will go on to say, there was something about him, his eyes, it was just something dark. So I didn't like him. That was just from the get-go. She also said that he was really stuck up, which I could see that. I got that sense too, just from watching him in the interview, but it is what it is. Now, since Russell couldn't keep a job, it forced Catherine to be the breadwinner for not only her and Russell, but now they had 2 little boys to take care of. Her family would come to find out that money was the least of their problems. There was reportedly domestic violence at home, according to Catherine's family. There were bruises and scratches, and she would try to cover them up with makeup. It was so noticeable that you could see the foundation and everything else she used trying to cover up her eyes. Her family could tell what was going on, but still, the smooth-talking Russell was able to always charm his way back into Catherine's life. He kept telling her that he changed and he wouldn't do it anymore. He would tell her that they had a family and they need to be together. Another hard part for her family was seeing her always defending him. She would say things like, well, he's a good dad. Her family begs to differ on that. After a while, enough was enough, and Catherine was ready to end her relationship with Russell. One of her sisters said their relationship was as washed up as his career. They are shady, and I love it. She was ready to do her own thing and live her own life by herself with her 2 kids. She put her kids in a new private preschool, and in the morning, she would have their lunches ready, breakfast ready. She was just very organized. It was just about her boys. She wanted them to succeed. They were trying to move on, just the 3 of them, but Russell wasn't here for any of it. After leaving her mom's house on June 28, 2014, Catherine Martinez was nowhere to be found. Her family couldn't reach her, and Russell said that he hadn't seen her and he was watching the boys at her apartment. Then on July 1st, 2014, just a few days later, out of the blue, a cool and collected Russell Neal strolls into the Houston Police Department. A dedicated High Five fan catches a glimpse of Russell Neal at the police department. She snaps a couple pictures of Russell, who's waiting to speak to the police about Catherine, but if only she knew what was coming next. While at the police department, he wouldn't say that Catherine was dead. He just kept saying that they got into a fight and she needed medical attention. Paramedics raced to the apartment that Catherine shares with her 2 young sons. Now, when they got there, it was the stuff that you find in nightmares, as quoted by one of the paramedics who arrived on the scene first. Police said they found Catherine dead, bashed with a blunt object, and stab wounds from multiple strikes with a sharp object. Prosecutors don't want to compromise their case by saying what those objects are, but there's no doubt the assault was extremely vicious. You couldn't tell it was her. Glenda, who is one of Catherine's sisters, is quoted as saying, "I was just hoping they had the wrong person because it didn't look like her. I mean, we all know she was beautiful, but it didn't look like her at all," Glenda goes on to say. Everyone who saw Catherine's body says that her murder was definitely overkill. And the worst part, if it couldn't get any worse, was that Catherine's little boys were at home when this happened. They were right there locked in their room just feet away from where their own father brutally beat their mother to death. They believed that one of the boys walked out and saw their mother laying there dead. For years, he would continuously have nightmares, and he even asked his dad why he had blood on his shoes, and his dad told him it was ketchup. When her mother had to go identify her daughter's body, she said that she didn't even recognize her own daughter. Now, mind you, before Russell strolled his ass into the police department, Catherine had been dead in that apartment for days, with not only Russell, but her sons there as well. Law enforcement already knew it was Russell that killed Catherine, and after his admission to the murder, he refused to say any more without a lawyer. He was then charged with first-degree murder and released on $100,000 bond. Wow. Adding even more insult to their pain, Catherine's two little boys are left in the care of Russell Neal's mom. I mean, how? Now, before the murder, the boys were with Russell for an entire month. He was actually bringing them back to the home when he killed Catherine. They believe that they got into some kind of argument. Maybe he was trying to talk his way back. Catherine wasn't trying to have it. And things just, of course, obviously got way out of hand. If it wasn't bad enough that the man accused of killing their mother, that his mother had custody of their sons, but Russell's mother was letting him see the boys. His dumb ass would hide and come over there and let them take baths and just be there like nothing happened, like someone else did it and whatever. It's just crazy. So the cops found out about that, and that's how they were removed from Russell Neal's mother's care. And Child Protective Services immediately moves the boys into the care of Catherine's mom, Mary, who at the time of the murder, the boys were only 3 and 4 years old. And mind you, they're still young to this day because this happened in 2014. 2 months later, Russell's bond is revoked. He should have never got bond in the first damn place, but I won't hop on my soapbox about that, so we'll just move on. After the bond was revoked, then the games really begin. Russell tells his bail bondsman he no longer answers to Russell Neal. His new name is Jesus Christ. Yep, he's trying to play the crazy game. So after a year of treatment at Rusk State Hospital, the Harris County Court comes to the conclusion that Russell Neal is mentally ill and remains incompetent to stand trial. Bullshit. So as of 2017, Russell Neal was in a state mental hospital ruled incompetent to stand trial, even though the police say the singer knew what he was doing when he murdered his ex-girlfriend. Prosecutors refused to drop the murder charges. Good. He's ordered to continue treatment, and he had another competency hearing in August 2017. Now, if this story isn't wild enough, Russell isn't the only Neal that's been accused of murder. Russell's younger brother, Ronald Neal, also now sits in prison for the murder of his own wife. And instead of pleading insanity at the time, he went with the crime of passion motive. But that's a whole different story for a whole different day. I mean, both brothers not only accused of murder, but murdering their own spouses. There's a special place, okay? Now, I tried to find updates on Russell Neal and the case, and I couldn't find any recent news. I couldn't even find how the competency hearing went in August 2017, if they still had it. I just don't know where it stands to this day. As of right now, he is still charged with the murder of Catherine Martinez. I do know that much. And if I find anything else out, trust me, I will update you on the story because, we need to know. So from the beginning, High Five had just went through it. From the beginning to the very end. As I mentioned, they do still tour. They still perform. I didn't see any recent music releases from them, but they're obviously still out there doing their older hits. As I mentioned earlier as well, no one will replace Tony's voice, but I'm happy that they're still out there doing their thing. Russell Neal, you and your brother, there's a special place, like I said. There's a special place for you two, and you know where. Thank you all for tuning in to DannieBSpeaks Presents Not Another True Crime Podcast. Now don't forget to check out my other podcast, DannieBSpeaks the Podcast. And you can listen to both podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Audible, my website, DannieBSpeaks.com, where you can also check out other stories and blog posts that I'm doing. I have some other projects and writings that I'll be working on. But my favorite place to listen to the podcast is on my YouTube channel, and you can find it at DannieBSpeaks. And while you're listening, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube page. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DannieBSpeaks. So be on the lookout for some new things coming in 2022. There'll be more writing projects, collaborations, merchandise, way too much going on. So if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, concerns, you can hit me up at DannieBSpeaks@gmail.com. If you would like to collaborate, would like for me to promote your work and products, hit me up at DannieBSpeaks@gmail.com. Again, as always, thank you for listening, and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.